Welcome to Whisperwood Stories. Today, we read 2 stories from r/backwoodscreepy. Let's begin. Our first story is from DylonNotNylon. Followed in the Woods. Not as freaky as the other stuff on here, but my contribution. I go hunting in southern Illinois, on property that my family owns. The place is my second home, and I've spent countless hours exploring all around every inch of it. Caught all the fish in the area, hunted every legal game, and spotted the rest. So when I say that I've never had an experience like this, just remember that this was my domain, that I felt comfortable in any weather, any time, with any equipment, or lack thereof. 2 deer seasons ago, I had pulled into the farm at probably around 4:40 in the morning. November, so at least 2 hours till sunlight. I pull my stuff out of the truck and walk into the woods. I have my shotgun and a revolver/knife on my belt, an elbow light clipped to the front of me, a thermos of coffee, and a backpack with a book and a couple of other things for cleaning my deer should I get lucky. So I walk off the drive and into the woods. The tree stand I'm going to is less than a mile away, but through some dense second-growth forest and down a rather steep hill, across some bottoms, then a long-burning steep climb up to another ridge. I always dread the hike, but it's a good spot, so I often do it. I make it down to the bottoms, slush through the icy muck, and get to climbing. With my flashlight clipped to my chest, I keep needing to physically turn my body to throw the beam around and see trees that I recognize to determine my path. This, of course, always gives the forest a horror movie vibe, even on the best of days. The leaves and underbrush are encased in frost, so every one of my steps comes with a solid crunch, no matter how quiet I'm trying to be. This time, though, I noticed there was more noise than usual. Something else was crunching close by, too. I walked about a quarter of the way up the hill, listening to my company the whole time, seeming to stay the same distance away as I moved. Naturally, I think to myself that I'm going to have a quick hunting day. So I plop myself down next to a tree. Can't shoot till first light, but I'm hoping if I stay really still, that whatever I'm hearing will lounge around until then. So I click my light off, unsling the shotgun, and lay it over my knees to wait. Except, I don't hear anything now. Whatever it was must have been spooked by my flashlight spinning all around as I sat. I stayed a bit, sipping some coffee to make sure, but give up after about 15 minutes or so of dead silence from the forest floor. I probably didn't even make 4 steps before the second moving thing starts again. At this point, I'm still not freaked out. I stay facing the way I am, flip the light off again, and sidestep behind a tree. Sure enough, I don't hear anything again. 2 minutes of sitting there, frustrated, before I start moving again. But my new friend does too. This is when I started to get freaked out, because I worked my way up the hill, stopping to turn and look every so often. When I stopped, the sound would go on for just an infinitesimally longer amount of time than my own steps. Like something seeing me stop and doing its very best to stop before I heard it. This happened no less than 4 times, and by now, I'm sweating bullets, freezing cold, because I'm sweating bullets in the middle of winter. I abandoned my thermos near a tree so I could hold my flashlight and my revolver at the same time. The last 100 feet or so to my stand was done backwards, so that I could be facing the noise and, in theory, keep it from moving. And I didn't hear anything again after that. Got up into my stand and smoked like 5 cigarettes in a row. Gave me a sense of security, being up in a tree behind camouflage. Still, I only hunted for an hour of daylight and went back early. And I wasn't moving slow heading back to the truck, even with the sun shining bright. I haven't told my family about it because they wouldn't believe me, but it was freaky. The sound, and when it decided to happen, felt very human, which it likely was, as poachers and trespassers occasionally wander onto our property. Still, ever since then, when I go hunting, I'm much better about letting people know where I'm going and for how long. Our last story is from Sad Pineapple, Shrine in the Forest. So this story isn't all that scary once you find out what's going on in the end. It was very unsettling at the time. This story is true. This happened last summer. My husband's best friend flew out from LA to visit us in rural Iowa. My husband grew up in LA, but I was raised here, and this is where we decided to settle down. We wanted to give our friend the full rural/small town experience. And one thing you don't realize when you're from the city is how completely pitch black it is out here, with no street lamps or city lights to illuminate the night. It's something my husband commented on when he first moved here. There is a dense forest that covers several square miles just outside of town. It's a protected wildlife reserve. There are a lot of legends about this forest being haunted, because it was the site of a bloody battle between Native American tribes, and is also a burial ground. The creepy old stone tower and dilapidated amphitheater in the middle of the woods are said to be especially haunted. There is also a pond in the heart of the forest that the locals refer to as Dead Man's Lake, because somebody drowned in it several years ago, and the body was never recovered. I'm not sure if it was accidental or a suicide. I've heard many different renditions of the story. I don't believe in ghosts, and I'm not afraid of the dark or the woods, but my husband's friend does. This park technically closes at 10 p.m., but we decided to risk it and took our friend into the forest at midnight on a moonless night. We visited the tower first. I'd never seen it at night, and the sight of its black silhouette against the starry sky, surrounded by gnarled, dead trees, was an unsettling one that set the mood for the rest of the night. After a little convincing, we got our friend to follow us into the tower, up the old creaky spiral staircase. We spent some time surveying the surrounding scenery and enjoying our view of the clear night sky from the tower's rooftop lookout. The view was magnificent, and I thought it looked magical. But our friend just seemed to be getting more nervous by the second. We hiked back down the long dirt trail to the car, but kept hearing what sounded like footsteps coming from the trees on both sides and from behind us. Our friend was scared it could be something paranormal. I was worried about drug dealers or meth heads, since there's a large population of sketchy people and frequent meth lab busts in this area. My husband and I both had our 9mm pistol strapped to our belts, but we didn't want to have to use them. We picked up our pace back to the car and drove further into the forest, to the place where the trail to the old amphitheater begins. Our friend was really on edge now, since the trees are much denser in this part of the forest, and it is incredibly dark. We convinced him to follow us down the steep, rocky trail to the amphitheater. When we arrived, I noticed a tall structure standing in the center of the amphitheater that has never been there before, but it was too dark to tell what it was. I had been using only the light of my smartwatch to guide my way, so as not to ruin the eerie illusion created by the inky darkness of the forest with a flashlight beam. At this point, even my husband was becoming uneasy and wanted to turn back, but I had to know what that mysterious object was, which had appeared in the last 2 days since my hike to this part of the forest. I carefully made my way down into the center of the arena and drew closer to the structure, my husband and our friend following close behind. When I was a couple feet away from the object, I lifted my wrist to illuminate it with light from my watch, and I felt the sense of dread and fear wash over me. Standing before me was a 10-foot tall wooden arch, wrapped in red silk and adorned with animal bones and red roses. The skull of a deer with massive antlers was mounted at its peak. A smaller object that sat lower to the ground that I hadn't seen before looked to be some kind of stone altar. Suddenly, the rustling noises coming from the forest on all sides that I had previously chalked up to be animals or the wind seemed much more threatening. My first thought was that a malicious cult or band of Satanists were lying in wait to sacrifice us to a demon, as ridiculous as it sounds. But in that moment, it seemed possible and likely. All 3 of us jumped and turned toward the direction of our car when we heard a car door close and saw the faint glow of headlights peeking through the trees. We rushed back up the trail, expecting to find some crackheads attempting to break into our car. We didn't know whether to be relieved or apprehensive when we saw a DNR truck parked next to our car, and the officer scanning the trees with his flashlight. He greeted us and asked us what we were up to. We told him that we were showing our friend around, and he informed us that the park was closed. He noticed our firearms and asked for our permits and IDs, which we gave him. He went back to his trunk to run our info and returned minutes later with an $80 ticket for being in the park past closing. After that, we spent about 15 minutes having a friendly chat with the officer when he asked, "So what's the amphitheater like at night?" I told him it was really creepy and proceeded to describe what we had witnessed. The officer chuckled at the terrified looks on our faces and told us that a Wiccan couple had rented out the amphitheater for their wedding tomorrow and had been by today to decorate. So a bit of a disappointing ending. I was relieved at first, but also disappointed. I plan to return to the forest on another dark night, but this time I'll go alone. And I'll go on foot, so the DNR can't find me. Thank you for listening to Whisperwood Stories. If you enjoyed, don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe down below. Do you have a story that you'd like me to read here? Consider commenting or sending it to whisperwoodsubmissions@gmail.com. The stories in this video were read with their author's permissions. Thank you again for listening, and be sure to check out the original Reddit posts. Don't let the shadows get too close.